All right, well, welcome to this webinar for Vistas on using the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award. The Education Award is one of the most significant benefits for a lot of Vistas. To make the most of this award, it's really important to know all the ways that it can be used and understand its limitations. Again, I'm Calvin Landrum, a training coordinator for the AmeriCorps Vista program, and I'll be your host. Joining me today as a co-presenter is Nahid Jarrett with the National Service Trust. Originally from New Jersey, Nahid holds a degree in finance from Hampton University, and prior to working at the trust, she worked as an accountant. She has now been a trust officer with CNCS for 5 years and recently transitioned into a team lead position. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
We will also hear about 2 AmeriCorps alums today and how they use their education award. Before we jump into the real meat of this presentation, let's take a look at our agenda. Today, we'll clarify the benefits and limitations of the Education Award, show how to make a payment, explore the eligible uses of the award, and close with how the Education Award impacts your taxes. If during the presentation you have any questions, please write them down and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. You can also use the Q&A panel on the right side of the screen and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to turn things over to Nahid, who will start us off. Nahid?
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Calvin. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be on this webinar today. As Calvin said, I work for the National Service Trust, the department within CNCS that manages the Education Award. As part of your VISTA benefits, you are eligible to receive a Segal AmeriCorps Education Award if you successfully complete a 12-month term of service. The Education Award amount for a full-time member is currently $5,775. Selecting the Education Award also allows you to access some other important benefits like the National Service Forbearance and interest accrual payments. National Service Forbearance allows you to postpone payments on your federal student loans during the service and have up to 100% of the interest that accrued on the loans paid after your service. The Education Award benefit can be administered completely through the AmeriCorps.gov portal, where you can make payments towards educational expenses, or manually by completing a manual voucher and payment request form. So we're going to spend more time about what this includes a little later. Now, next we're going to talk about your Education Award limitations. The Education Award is an excellent way to pay for future education costs or school loans, but it does have some limits to be aware of. You have 7 years to use the Education Award from the date you complete your VISTA service. You can divide your award and use portions of it at different times. You could, for example, apply a portion of it to existing qualified student loans and save the remainder to pay for authorized college costs a few years down the road. If you extend your service, you're only eligible for the end of service stipend during the extension period and cannot receive forbearance or interest payments for the extension period. Another limitation to be aware of is that for VISTAs, the Education Award is not transferable to dependents. This means you cannot give your Education Award to anyone else. Should you decide to serve multiple terms, be aware there is a limit on the value of Education Award that an individual is allowed to receive. By law, an individual may not receive more than the aggregate or total value of 2 full-time education awards. And finally, the Education Award is counted as taxable income, so you may incur a tax liability, but we'll come back to this later. So next, what is the Education Award anyway? Upon successfully completing your year of service, which many of you may be about to do, you are allowed access to a trust fund that is set up in the U.S. Treasury Department that we refer to as the AmeriCorps Education Award. The funds that you are eligible to receive can be used for one or two things: qualified student loans and eligible education expenses at a Title IV institution. The Education Award is managed through the AmeriCorps online account. Once you have completed your term of service, you'll be able to access a link from your home screen to create an Education Award payment request. You will have access to the form where you will enter the payment type, the amount authorized, and the institution where the payment will be directed. When you click on Submit, a notice will be sent electronically to your educational or lender. Now, let me just clarify this. In order for your payment request to be sent electronically, your institution or lender needs to be registered through the AmeriCorps portal. If they are not registered through the AmeriCorps portal, then you would submit a manual voucher to your lender, which would need to go through the mail. Your lender or your institution would need to certify that voucher and send it back to the trust office. Now we're going to explore all the different ways you can use your education award. We're going to clarify what type of loans this applies to and what that might look like.
We've already had a question about that. Someone says, how do you find out if your loans are qualifying? We are getting to that, and he's going to tell us.
Okay, so for qualified student loans would have to either be federally backed or state-issued student loans. So if you have a loan that you receive through your institution, that institution would have to have they can't be private, and the institution would have to have that loan backed by that state agency, if that makes sense. We can't do private loans. We can't do loans through, like, let's say if you have your credit card, Discover, anything, all that would be considered private. Even if your institution is, you know, in the state of North Carolina, that does not make it a public institution, and that does not necessarily mean that it is a state-issued loan.
Yeah, so, you know, on that note, although your loans may be serviced to other companies like Nelnet or ACS or Fed Loan, they're still owned by the government or backed by the government, so those would qualify as student loans, or as qualified student loans. So I myself have used my education award to pay for my student loans, so let me tell you a little bit about that. You know, and I really wanted to take a second to share my personal experience so that I could demonstrate, you know, how what we're talking about today applies to a real person and what I've learned navigating this whole process. So I served 2 terms in AmeriCorps and CCC, and I had about $34,000 in qualified student loan debt serviced by ACS and by Fed Loan. From my time serving in AmeriCorps and CCC, I earned $11,195 in education award funds and about $2,900 in interest payments. So while serving, you know, I took advantage of the national forbearance, of the national service forbearance and the interest payments so that I could reduce the burden of living on a fixed stipend. So when I started my service with CCC, I just graduated college about 3 weeks before, and my loans were already up for repayment, so I immediately put them into forbearance. At the end of my first year, I made an interest payment to both of my servicers. You know, I knew that I was going to do a second year of service, so I also used my education award to make a payment for the month between my 2 terms. My term ended in November. I started again in January, so I made a payment using my education award just for the month of December. Luckily, I only had to do it for 1 month because before I took advantage of, you know, income-based repayment, my payments were about $250 each for a total of about $500 a month, which was killer, and that's a lot of money a month. You know, it was really nice to have the education award to help me with this payment between my periods of forbearance. So fast forward going into my second year of service, I placed my loans into forbearance again, and I really didn't think about them until my year was up. At the end of my second year, I made a lump sum payment of about $10,670 to one of my servicers, ACS. You know, I wanted to get rid of my loans with them and just bring myself down to one loan servicer, Fed Loan. The reason for this, you know, was, again, to have one less payment each month and to generally rid myself of a large chunk of debt. Another reason was because Fed Loan was way more willing to work with me on payments and what I could afford. You know, I could have used my education award to make payments each month on both of my loans, but for my personal situation, which is all I can speak to, it really made more sense for me to do things the way that I did. Currently, I've used all of my education award funds, but I think I'm in a much better financial situation because of it. You know, managing student loans can be a complicated and somewhat daunting process. So if you'd like more detailed information about managing your loans or opting into different loan programs, we do have a recent webinar completely devoted to that topic available on the Vista campus. I think the recording is one that I did, so you'll get to hear my voice again. And I think the link for that, yeah, the link is posted in the chat, so check that out if you would like more detailed information about your student loans. So thank you for letting me take a second, Nahid. Would you please tell us more about using the Education Award to pay for your future educational expenses?
Sure thing, Calvin. There are many ways that you can use the Education Award to pay for tuition as well as other educational-related expenses. So we're going to clarify which types of expenses qualify and how you might go about that process. So let's check in. Which ways do you think you use the Education Award? Check all that you think apply.
Yeah, so we got our options are 4-credit class at a university, a non-credit class at a community college, sailing class in Mexico, who wouldn't like to do that, a GRE test prep course, or class supplies. So you'll see the poll on the right side of your screen. So we'll take a second and let people answer that. Sailing class in Mexico. Actually, I think we have a story about that coming up on this webinar. A non-credit class at a community college, that'd probably be what, like something like pottery, photography maybe, Excel skills. I know my grandma took a computer course at a community college once. It didn't help at all. She still calls me, asks me, I can't print this thing, so I have to, walk her through all that. Let's see, we still have some time left. Let's see, our poll is tabulating. Let's see what your results are. All right, so let's see. We've got people that said, we've got a lot of people that said you could use it at a 4-credit class at the university. Let's see, test class supplies. Let's see, what is this one? GRE test prep course. We've got a lot of people that said you could use it for that. And a couple people with no answer. Shame on you. Participate. I'm just kidding. Cool. So let's see. What's the answer? The answer is all of these expenses are eligible to be used with your Education Award. There's one very, very, very important caveat, and that is that you must pay for them through a Title IV institution.
And that is very important, especially when you're looking to do your GRE test prep course. If it is not held at a Title IV institution, that Title IV institution is not hosting that course, and we're not paying that Title IV institution for your GRE test prep course, that will not be eligible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to eligible education expenses. The Education Award can be used to pay for eligible education expenses incurred at Title IV institutions. Title IV institutions have in place a Title IV program participation agreement and can receive federal student aid. There are over 30,000 Title IV institutions, including universities, community colleges, and many other educational institutions. A great way to find out if a school is eligible is to check out FAFSA. So what I would suggest you guys do is log on to FAFSA, and there is a place on FAFSA where you can check out schools' Title IV school code to see if they have a participation agreement with the Department of Education. What I suggest you do to make the search a little bit easier is do not try to put in a lot of information. Just use the location of your institution, like the state. Select the year, 2016, 2017, and hit search, and a list of institutions will show up on that screen, letting you know which ones have that participation agreement. So we know that a traditional four-year university isn't the ideal experience for everyone, so keep in mind that there are many trade schools on a Title IV school list as well, including flight training, culinary school, massage schools. On the list there are also untraditional schools such as tattoo schools, cosmetology programs, and study abroad programs as well that accept federal funds. Another great use for the Education Award are non-credit enrichment classes like guitar, swimming, photography, or anything else that is offered through an eligible community college or public university. If you take 1 or 2 classes per quarter at a community college, you can make your award last for 4 years.
Yeah. So another great benefit of the Education Award is that there are schools that will match your Education Award. So if you decide to use it to pay for tuition, you'll want to consider, there are all of these other institutions out there. These come in the form of matching funds, scholarships, expanded benefits, or any combination of those things. So one thing to note is that often these matching funds or scholarships are for specific programs or specific departments, such as the business school within a larger university or the school of public policy within a larger university. So please look carefully and really do your research and get in touch with those colleges and universities, to ask them for more details. For example, Carnegie Mellon University Heinz College offers a minimum scholarship of $10,000 per semester for Vista alums. Again, call them and get more details about that one. Emory University's School of Public Health offers a $5,000 match when you use your Education Award. So when combined with the Education Awards, the savings can be really great. Some other matching institutions include Texas A&M, University of Arizona, University of Colorado, Duke University, and many, many more. There's a full list if you follow the link that is posted to the chat. So take a second and take a look at that list if you haven't already, and send out some emails, send out some feelers, and follow up on those and get some more information if you're interested in any of them. But beyond tuition, there are also a variety of other uses that the Education Award can be put towards. So to explore that a little bit further, Jessica Knight, a Vista alum, is going to share with us how she used her Education Award. Jessica?
Thanks, Calvin. Thanks, Nahid. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be able to share with you today a little bit more about how I ended up using my Ed Award. So I completed my year of service in 2010, and I've since used my Ed Award for 2 different educational expenses. So I'm going to talk about my experience with both of those, kind of spread out over many years. So immediately after service, I used the majority of my award to reduce one of my student loans, kind of as Calvin did, but I decided not to use all of it. I sort of knew that I was kind of interested in exploring grad school down the line, but I wasn't quite ready yet. So I did save about $1,500 of my Ed Award to look into that later. So then fast forward a couple years later, in 2013, I found a grad program that I was curious about, and I decided to use that money to take one class in that program to see if I actually wanted to pursue the whole program. So because this is a 4-credit program, I had to apply to the program, get accepted, and then register for the class. Once I did that, I was able to submit a request on my AmeriCorps to pay the tuition for the class. It was really easy, honestly reminded me sort of like paying someone on Venmo or something. Just submit that request on my AmeriCorps, and I didn't think much about it. So then a few weeks later, I went back to check my online student account, and I was kind of shocked because I noticed that the school had received money, but it was only half of what I had requested. So I freaked out a little bit, and I called the trust, and I learned that the Ed Award payments are sent in 2 separate installments. So my school received 1/2 of the money I requested about 2 weeks after, and then the second half of that a few weeks later. It also took my school a little bit of additional time to process the money once they received it. So, in the end, my full tuition payment was received on time for that class, but just barely. So that's just something to keep in mind. And Nahid, I understand that this is something that trips people up quite a bit. You get a lot of calls about this. So is there anything you want to add in terms of the 2 payments?
Yes. So please keep in mind that any payment over $10 will be split into 2 equal payments. So if you are submitting a payment request for, let's say, $1,000, and your institution, what they're going to do is they're going to certify your enrollment dates. So let's say your enrollment dates are September 1st, and the midpoint date of that enrollment is October 1st. So we're going to send out the initial $500 in September, and then a second payment of $500 will go out in October. So please keep in mind that if you call your institution, you're checking to see if they received the payment and they're telling you they only received half, please do not worry or stress yourself out. It's just that we are required to send the payments out in 2 split payments, but that excludes loans. So if you were to submit a payment for $5,000 to your lender, that $5,000 would go out in 1 payment because that works a little bit different than educational expenses.
Awesome. Thanks, Naheed. That is good information to know. Okay, so after I took that class, I ended up pursuing the whole grad program, had a great experience, but I still I had about $100 left in my Ed Award balance. And so fast forward to this year, and I'm approaching my 7-year limit, so I decided to take a Spanish class at a local community college, something I'd always wanted to do. This class was not for credit, and so I didn't need to apply to a program, so I was able to submit my tuition request right away. The only problem was that the payment for the class was due within 2 weeks of registering, and I was pretty sure my Ed Award funds, I couldn't rely on them being there before that deadline. So I called the financial aid office, and they were pretty used to the situation. And they said, hey, you're going to need to pay out of pocket. And then once we, the school, receives your education award money, we will reimburse you back. So it worked fine, but it did take about 4 to 5 weeks to complete that process and get reimbursed. So these are just a few pretty straightforward examples to give you an idea of how this process might look. And I think really the main thing to keep in mind is that each school's tuition deadlines are going to be different, and the way they process payments may be different. So it's really important when you're thinking about how you want to use your Ed Award, if you're going to use it for tuition, call their financial aid office, talk to someone there, figure out how they advise that you do this, and be really clear about those deadlines before registering. It's also, I maybe would recommend to keep a copy of this presentation or some notes with you over the years, because I had a little presentation like this when I ended service, but I didn't use my award for 3 and 6 years later, so it was hard to remember some of these little points. So now we're going to hear about another alum who found a way to take a class in Mexico. Calvin?
Yeah, before we get to that, I think Naheed has another point to make, something else to say in regards to your situation.
Yes, so Jessica, I just wanted to reiterate when you were saying that you went to your institution, they had you pay out of pocket, and they stated that they were going to reimburse you. It's very important that if you're going to do that and you have this conversation with your institution, please, 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 I cannot stress this enough, get it in writing from your institution. We have had many instances where the student has paid out of pocket because their institution said, we'll reimburse you once you pay out of pocket, and then when it comes time to allowing us to submit the funds on their behalf so that way the institution can send the reimbursement back to the institution, it did not go that way. And so the student was left with paying out of pocket and not getting reimbursed. And as you know, you cannot have these federal funds dispersed to you as reimbursement from our federal agency. So it's very important that when you talk to your institution about these things, you always get it in writing. You always want to back yourself up to make sure that you can always go back and say, look, I have proof, this is what our conversation was, this is what we agreed upon, so that way you don't have to worry about anything falling through and leaving you stuck.
Totally, that's a good rule for life in general. Always get it in writing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so now we're going to go on. I'm going to tell you guys another story about my good friend Rob. Rob works here with us at CNCS, and he was a VISTA, and this is sort of his story. I'm going to give him permission to tell his story about how he used his education award to take a sailing class in Mexico. So Rob Cox served as a VISTA member with Jumpstart in Boston. He completed his service in 2004. As the 7-year deadline for using the education award was approaching, Rob was faced with finding an opportunity to use the education award in a way that really made sense for him. He wasn't interested in taking a regular university class, and he was also looking for the type of learning that happens outside the traditional classroom. So after researching a number of options, he decided to use his education award to take a course with the National Outdoor Leadership School, or NOLS, as some of you are familiar. Rob took a course called Baja Coastal Sailing and spent 21 days in the field around the Gulf of California near the desert of Baja, Mexico. That sounds amazing. There, he learned the technical aspects of sailing, including navigation, wind and wave theory, and meteorology, along with learning to survive the extremes of the desert environment. So NOLS itself is not an eligible institution for using the Education Award. You can't just send money to NOLS and take a course with them. But fortunately, NOLS has developed agreements with two other institutions, the Central Wyoming College and Western State Colorado University. These two are Title IV institutions. So what this does is this allows AmeriCorps alums to use their education awards for NOLS courses and receive credit from one of these accredited universities. So you would need to apply to both NOLS and to one of the Title IV institutions, and then the education award can be used to pay for NOLS tuition and equipment deposits. For more information about outdoor and international travel options using the Education Award, check out the link that is in the chat. There's a really good link there that takes you back to the nationalservice.gov website that lists all kinds of other cool opportunities. So beyond tuition, you can use the award for other expenses related to attendance. We're going to jump back to Nahid, who's going to talk to us about that.
Sure. Thanks, Calvin. You can use your education award to pay for supplies and living expenses needed to attend your institution. This includes books, school supplies, equipment, as well as cost of living. That would be room and board. However, there are a few things that you must keep in mind. First, using the award for these things does take planning and organization on your part. Any expense that you would like to use the education award must be directly attributable to a class that you are taking. You cannot just go to Best Buy and get a camera with your education award just because you want one. The camera must be a requirement for a class that you are taking, and the expense needs to be approved by your school's financial aid office. Any expense outside of tuition must be connected to a class that you are taking in order to use the education award. Second, let's remember that your education award balance is not like a bank account that you can draw down cash for buying things. Funds can only be sent from your AmeriCorps account to the financial aid office at the Title IV institution or lender. Funds do not get sent to you or a store that you need supplies from. You will end up getting reimbursed for approved expenses through your institution's financial aid office if that is something that you discuss and once you receive it in writing, as I mentioned before. Where this can get complicated is that every school's financial aid office may operate a little bit differently, so an important first step is to get acquainted with a financial aid counselor and read the rules of the regulations for the education award. That is also important. Please read all the rules because a lot of times our members do not read all the rules, and when they go to try to use their education award, they are very often surprised at things that they thought they would be able to use the education award for that they are not able to. And so now that is an unexpected expense that they have to come out of their pocket with. So let's look at a step-by-step on how it might work if you needed a camera for a photography class and want to use the education award. Again, your institution has to approve the class that you're taking and let us know that it is impossible to complete or successfully complete this class without a camera. So first, you need to work with a financial aid counselor to make sure that the expense qualifies for payment using the education award. And then together you would they would give you your total cost for the expense. Second, using the AmeriCorps portal, you would submit your education award payment request to your institution in the amount you and the financial aid counselor have worked out. And then you should receive your approved expense back from the school. If you have a financial aid package, it would be included in that. If you do not, then the school would likely add it to your student account. This can be a tricky process to navigate, so make sure that you're working closely with your financial aid counselor and that you have done your research beforehand. We're now going to go back to Calvin, who's going to talk to us about taxes.
Woo, taxes, everyone's favorite. So before we jump in, we have another poll. We want to know, how well versed everyone is on taxes already. So we have a couple poll questions that now are on the right side of the screen. So please take a moment, to tell us how knowledgeable you are about taxes, and then answer the question about the taxability of the education award and interest accrual payment. Your responses are anonymous, so feel free to answer honestly. So our first question is, how knowledgeable are you about taxes? Would you say you're practically an expert, pretty well versed, I know a little bit, or taxes, what is that? The second question is, which of the following, if any, are taxable? And, you can select more than one. Is it the education award in the year you finish your VISTA service, the education award in the year that you use it, the interest accrual payment in the year that you finish your VISTA service, or the none of the above? So while you're answering the poll questions, I'll also add that though people generally don't like to have to figure out their taxes, it is certainly an area where it pays to literally do your research, or pays to do your research. This is an area where a little knowledge can go a long way. And, so you may want to make some notes and put them someplace where you'll be able to find them, come tax time. All right, so let's take a look at how those poll responses are coming along. Let's see, our poll is ended. It's calculating. Let's see, we've got, okay, so our most common answer, popular answer is, I know a little bit. So people, they know a little bit about taxes. Maybe, we have a lot of people who have never done their taxes on their own yet. Taxes are, they're just hard and complicated. Even when you have done them, they're hard. And we got a couple, taxes, that answer. We got two experts out there in the field. Those two experts, maybe we can get in touch, and maybe you can help us with another webinar. Let's see, which of the following, if any, are taxable? Let's see, everyone said the education award in the year that you use it, or 163 people said that. Let's see, 3 people said none of the above. All right, so the answers, the answer to the second one, which of these are taxable is, let's see, what are the answers? The education award in the year that you use it, and the interest accrual payment in the year that you finish your service. So, yeah, so it also looks like, maybe some people don't know as much about taxes as they might want to. So hopefully we can provide some useful information in this webinar. And, despite that, a good number of you correctly identified that the education award is taxable income in the year that you use it, and the interest accrual payment is taxable income in the year that the payment is made, which is typically at the end of your VISTA service. So, topic of taxes, let's talk about it. It's one that usually raises a lot of questions. So we'll cover some basic information here. And as we just saw, the education award and any interest payments made on your behalf during your service are considered taxable income. We don't want any of you to be surprised by this, so that's why we're covering it here. As we move through this next section of the webinar, very, very, very important to please remember that we're approaching the topic of taxes as it specifically relates to your education award. We won't be able to address questions about taxes in general. We are not tax experts. This is not legitimate tax advice. This is a general, overview of what taxes are, what they could look like for your personal situation. So please, when you're doing your own taxes, seek out information, do your own research, and make sure that you have the answers that are specific to what you need. So, as you all know, again, the education award and any interest payments made are taxable. So, the first big piece of information to take away is that any use of the education award is considered income that is taxable. So, you'll be taxed on the amount that was used and the year that it was used. But this also means that if a year goes by and you don't use any of your education award, you don't have to pay taxes on it. Your education award is only taxed in the amount that you use it in the year that it was used. So while it's a good idea to report any amount of the education award used when you file taxes, a 1099 miscellaneous form will only generate if you use $600 or more in a given year. If you use less than $600 of your education award, a 1099 won't generate, but you may still be responsible for the taxes on the amount that was used. So as Nahid mentioned earlier, interest accrual payments are also considered taxable income and will need to be reported during the year you receive those payments. If your interest accrual payments were over $600, again, you can expect to have a 1099 form automatically generated. If not, you should look into that, and you may need to report it anyway. So let us take a second to consider tax liability. Tax liability, let's see. Businesses tend to have, a lot of questions about this one too. Like what am I liable for? So we understand that you would probably like a specific estimate for your tax liability when using the education award. So we're going to clarify why it's not possible to give a standard universal estimate for VISTAs. This is because your tax liability depends on several personal and situational factors. What we can show you is a list of those primary factors that impact tax liability so you can make your own estimate. Again, this isn't comprehensive, but it's just a general outline. So, as a general rule, your tax liability will always be tied to your income during a given year. The education award is considered income, so when you use that, it'll be added to whatever your annual income is for that year. So, for a given year that you use all or part of your education award, what you owe in taxes will be dependent on the 5 factors listed here. Your total annual income during the year that you use the education award, the amount of the education award that you used, any tax credits or deductions which would reduce your taxable income, the federal tax rate, and the tax rate of the state that you earn the income in. So your total annual income plus the amount of award that you used, along with tax credits and deductions for adjustments based on your personal circumstances, gets you your total taxable income. That total taxable amount then gets taxed at the federal tax rate and taxed at the state tax rate of where you earn the income. So again, these are just the most basic factors, but as you can see, there's so many unknown variables going on. So let's take a look at how this might play out in some hypothetical situations. So let's start with a scenario for a hypothetical VISTA who just finished service in 2015. Let's say this VISTA had $10,000 of income in 2015. For 2015, in one version of this scenario, they used only $500 of their education award, and in the other version, they used the entire award, $5,775. In both cases, they have about $8,000 in credits and deductions. But as you can see, the added income from using the entire education award increases the overall taxable income. So this is a hypothetical example, but you can see how important it is to be aware of how much education award you're using relative to your other income in a given year. In this example, one had a higher taxable income than the other, but both would maybe be taxed at the same federal rate, because they fall in the same income bracket still. However, let's see how this might look after a few years at a different income level. So in another scenario to consider, let's say it's been a few years after your service. This VISTA is now making $40,000 a year at a job where they're still paying taxes throughout the year. They then decide to use their entire education award that year, full $5,775, which is then added to their taxable income for that year. So the total income is now $45,775. After subtracting credits and deductions from that, you can see that the taxable income of $37,775 has brought the VISTA into a higher tax bracket, so more taxes to pay. Again, tax brackets change, I think, yearly all the time, so you're going to want to do some research on this and figure out where you fall. So we said all of this to just demonstrate that every person has a different situation, and we cannot give you individual tax advice. Your own personal circumstances are going to determine your use of the education award, and you'll have to make some informed decisions like when and what amounts of your education award to use and what that means for you. So one way, another tool to estimate your own tax liability is to download a recent 1040 form and estimate filling it out with the most recent tax rates and your estimated information for the coming year. When making a decision about using your education award, we suggest that you first test this out to plan your tax liability. The 1040 form comes with instructions, and the IRS.gov website has many added resources to get you started. So speaking of resources, when it comes time to doing your taxes, there's lots of programs available online and in person that can help you out. For those with an income of less than $53,000, you can receive free in-person tax prep through VITA. That's the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. Free File is another great option to consider if you're looking for a quick and easy way to file your taxes. When it's time to file your return, you simply choose a free file service provider, download their software, and it'll walk you through the filing process. At the end, it'll automatically submit your return to the IRS, and free file services are available to those with a household income of $60,000 or less. If you have more questions about your taxes, we suggest that you connect directly with someone from the IRS or a tax professional. We realize that this is an important topic for VISTAs, but please be aware that we are not able to give personal tax advice. I know I keep saying that, but I have to stress that really hard, that we cannot give you tax advice. So there are several ways that you can contact the IRS and ask your questions. The IRS.gov website has a help and resources section, a contact us section, and there's a number of FAQs to help get you started. So, of course, these resources are specific to federal taxes. If you have questions about state taxes, my best advice is to look up your state's Department of Revenue and contact them directly. So what we're going to do is head back to Nahid, who is going to tell us about another resource.
Hey, thanks, Calvin. To make sure you can make use of all this information in the long run, CNCS has an online education award site for you to take advantage of, and I recommend that you browse this site. The link should be posted. This site is divided in two main areas: stories which illustrate many ways to use the Education Award, and a guidebook that organizes the information by topic. There are 7 different stories that illustrate different situations where an AmeriCorps member is deciding how best to use their Ed Award or ways to manage student loans. Each story comes with 1 or more short animated videos and links to additional information. And also, just go ahead and go to the main website, www.nationalservice.gov, and there's also other resources that you can choose from there that would break down the uses of the Education Award and qualified student loans, educational expenses. So as we begin to wrap up, we would love to hear from you. We want to know, did you find any new ways to use the Education Award? Did you change your mind about how you plan to use it? So we want to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, let's see what we got. So you can post those in the chat box on the right side of the screen. Let's see, did you find any new ways to use the Education Award? Did you change your mind about how you plan to use it? I feel like I would have probably changed my mind after this. I think when we first started, I saw some people post in the chat, I'm not sure if I want the Education Award or the stipend, so maybe this has helped them make a decision. See, Linda Pearson says, I will wait until next year to use it. All right, Linda. Let's see, anyone else? I don't think, you guys are quick typers. Let's see, Victoria says, I don't think I changed my mind. I want to use it for more education, but I now know I can use it in different amounts. Oh, yeah, so you can break it up. You don't have to use it all at one time. Elise, motorcycle safety course. I love that idea. I'm very jealous. I've been wanting to get a motorcycle for a while, be a cool guy. At least it's going to be way cooler than I'll be. Let's see. Ruth says, I can use the Education Award to cover supplies, but have to go through school financial aid. Excellent takeaway. Let's see. Candace says, nope, still using it all at once. All right, girl, whatever works for you, whatever works for you. Let's see. Then Kevin says, we'll try to use the Education Award before I change tax brackets. Hey, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Let's see. Ashley says, gained a better understanding of how disbursements work. That's a good takeaway. I know. Thank you, Nahid, for breaking that down. And also Jessica for sharing with us, her personal story. Cool. All right, cool. So let's move on. So here are some immediate next steps that you can take as a follow-up to this session. Number 1, explore the Education Award website and make sure that you're well informed about all the ways that you can actually use the award. Number 2, explore the list of Title IV institutions and see what's out there. As I said, there's so many things out there. The deputy chief of the trust, we found the tattoo school the other day. I don't remember what it was called, but it's there. There's all kinds of cool things you can do. Number 3, explore schools and programs that match the education award. You may discover programs and scholarships that you hadn't considered, and they can really increase your benefit. Someone posted in the chat that she just went to Emory University and found out that they actually upped the match to $6,000 instead of $5,000, so we're going to have to update our presentation. So down the line, once you've decided how to use the award, consider speaking to a financial aid counselor. I mean, like, heavily consider, like, I would almost say just, like, don't even consider it, just, like, know that you have to do it. If you plan to use your education award for your cost of attendance. And then finally, whether you plan to use it for repaying loans or for educational expenses, it's a good idea to estimate your tax burden in advance. So, thank you all so much for your participation. We are now going to get ready for our Q&A. Before we get there, though, we really want to know what you thought of this presentation. On the right side of your screen, you'll find a quick poll where you can share feedback about this webinar. So please, please, please take a moment to answer the questions. We like to be able to improve these webinars, and your input really helps us. We read through all of your comments every single time to see what you guys are saying, what you need, what your needs are, and we really try to adjust and make sure that these are as helpful to you as they possibly can be. So please take a second to fill out that poll. That'll be up throughout the remainder of the presentation, so you have plenty of time. So we've given you a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. So because we have a pretty large audience for this session, we may not be able to get to every question, but we will definitely do our best. We'll focus on questions that will likely be of interest to the audience as a whole, and not so much specific questions and that are specific to someone's individual circumstances. If you do have questions like that, we may refer you to the National Service Hotline, where you can get an answer that's more tailored to your specific situation. So you all are in for a treat. We have a wealth of knowledge in the room for your questions. Obviously, we have Nahid, who's here, who has been presenting wonderfully. And we also have the Deputy Chief of the National Service. His name is Jerry, and Jerry is here. Hello, Jerry.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So you can ask a question of us using the Q&A panel on the lower right of your screen, but we're also going to ask our operator to let us know how to ask a question by phone.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question through the phones, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Make sure your phone is unmuted and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name will be required to introduce your question. If you need to withdraw your question at any time, press *2. Again, to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. It will take a moment for questions to come through. Please stand by.
Thank you. So while we're waiting for questions on the phone, we do have a number of them queued up in the Q&A. So the first one is a pretty easy one. It probably was answered during the course of the presentation. How many loan payments are the equivalent of a Segal Education Award? It's as many loan payments as you can make with that education award. That's the easiest way to answer that question. If your loan payments are $100, you can get, I'm not great at math right now, 577 payments. Right? Is that math right?
57.
57 payments. See, I present. I'm not a mathematician.
But I'll just add to that. One of the things that you want to be cognizant of is some of your loan servicers and lenders will expect the lump sum payment instead of doing the individual payments to stretch it out, and they'll have specific guidelines in terms of how they'll apply that, and that also may qualify you for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program.
Awesome.
Those payments will be eligible payments to have your loans forgiven.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of loan forgiveness programs, we do have an entire presentation on student loans and things like that. So if you go back and watch that, we have a lot of information about loan forgiveness. Again, I think that's one that I did, so you get to hear me talk for another hour and a half.
And also I want to kind of jump in real quick. Just be very cognizant of when you're making your loan payments. Say you have your loan in forbearance and you're getting ready to make a payment, I would submit your interest payment first, because there are plenty of times when members, they've waited to make a payment because they're trying to figure out if they're going to consolidate or whatever, and in the meantime their lenders have changed hands, and all that interest that was accruing during your term of service, once the new lender acquires your loan, all that interest is rolled up into your loan payment. So the problem is once you make that initial payment with your payment request, you're not going to be able to go back and make your interest payment request because the new lender is going to look at it like you don't have any interest that accrued. So you don't want to miss out on any opportunity to get all of your benefits when it comes to paying your loan.
Totally. So let's see, we've got Jessica Agnatovich, I think I said that correctly, said instead of doing forbearance, can we do income-based repayment and still receive the interest accrual payment at the end of service? The answer is no, you cannot do that. Your loans must be in forbearance in order to receive the interest payment at the end of service. Let's see. Jerry, I think you can help us with this one. What about consolidated loans? I know my loans currently qualify, but my credit union has offered me a better interest rate. If I consolidate them, will I still be able to use the education award to pay for them?
So one of the things to be very careful of is that consolidation through that credit union is technically a new loan, and therefore that new loan may not be a qualified loan. So there are a very limited number of institutions that can offer you a consolidation. And primarily what you want to go through is you can go to the Department of Education's website to find those lenders where you can do a consolidation. But that better rate may exclude you from using your education award for repaying that student loan.
Yeah, good answer. All right, we're going to take a break. Alyssa, do we have any questions on the phone?
I show no questions in the queue at this time.
All right, thank you. So let's keep going. Let's see, Jacqueline Siriani says, if I take a class during service, is there a way to use the education award to pay for these classes? Would I be able to be reimbursed if I paid out of pocket for the classes, or would I have to take out a student loan and pay it back after service?
Okay, so we can tackle the question. It's like a multi-part question.
There are layers. Okay, we'll start this. So let's see. To take classes during service, is there a way to use the education award to pay for those classes?
Right. So you can take classes during service, but let's remember that in order to qualify to pay for classes, it would have to be after your service. So you can't, let's say you begin service May 1st, and you enroll into your class, April 31st. Because you're April 30th, saying, okay, well, I'm getting ready to start my term of service, so hopefully that'll qualify because this, my semester is going to stretch all the way out for the year. You will not be eligible to use your education award for that. But yes, if you have started classes after the start of your term of service, yes, you can pay for classes. Now, the second question was, the second part?
Would I be able to be reimbursed if I paid out of pocket for the classes, or would I have to take out a student loan and pay it back after service?
So, again, you would need to speak with your financial aid office because if you do pay out of pocket and your financial aid office tells you that they will go ahead and reimburse you once we send the money to the institution using your education award, then yes, you could pay out of pocket and possibly get reimbursed. But, again, you would need to speak to your financial aid office, get that worked out, and, again, get it in writing. If you do take out a loan, say you do not have the money to pay out of pocket initially, remember that it has to be a qualified student loan. If you're going to get a loan through your institution, make sure your institution is a public institution and that they are backed by a state agency, because if your institution is private, that is considered a private student loan. So be very careful when it comes to taking out loans to pay for educational expenses, because more than likely, if you don't do your research before, again, you will be stuck with owing that debt, and you will not be able to use your education award to pay that off.
Cool, thank you. So we've got one that I can take from Stacy at Kingsbury. It says, could you define extension under not eligible during extension? I'm doing my second VISTA year at a different host site, but it's managed by the same organization as my first VISTA year. Is this considered an extension? No, Stacy, that is not considered an extension. That is just you doing another year of service. An extension would be if you did your full 12 months of service and you needed, maybe your project requested an additional 3 months on your end of service so that you could wrap up a project. That 3 months is considered your extension, and you would not be able to earn any education award or any additional education award during that time. You'd only get the stipend, which accrues, I believe, at 120 $50 a month. So you'd get 3 months at $150. Let's see. Alyssa, do we have anyone on the phone?
Still no questions in queue.
All right, thanks. Let's see. I received a college loan from a private college. Can I use my education award to pay this? Ooh, that's Madison. Let's see. I feel like we may not be able to answer that because we may need more information.
Well, if the loan is from a private institution, then it is considered a private student loan, which is not eligible for repayment using the education award. So it's a pretty straightforward question.
Right.
So
there you go.
Unfortunately, the answer is no.
Yeah. Can you get a federal loan to pay for tuition at a private college?
So there's a large portion of institutions that receive federal student aid, federal student loans. They have that, what Nahid referred to earlier, is that program participation agreement. All that does is when you register for the free application for federal student aid, that makes you eligible for federal work-study, Pell Grant, and federal student loans. And so there are a number of private institutions that receive federal student loans. So yes, it is possible.
Cool.
And also to add on to what Jerry just said, a lot of times our members get confused. They think that just because their institution is dispersing their funds to their student account so that way they can use to pay for classes, that they think that their school is their lender, when actually that's not your lender. You know, it would be from whatever federally backed lender that is servicing that loan. So be very aware and cognizant of who your lender is. Just because your institution is dispersing the funds to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was that they are the loan holder.
Totally. We had someone in the comments in the chat say, I go to a private school in Denver, all of my loans are federal. So there you go, it's possible. Yeah. Let's see, Victoria says, could the award cover online courses for the universities or only if you attend the school directly? Victoria, that's a good question. The education award does cover online courses as long as they are billed and you're paying for them through the institution. And
it has to be a Title IV institution.
Correct. Let's see. If you, Lina, this is an interesting question, one that we've gotten before, or I've gotten before. If you do go into forbearance during your VISTA year, can you count that year in forbearance as part of working in a nonprofit and it going towards one of your 10 years required to have loan forgiveness? The answer is yes, you can. Even if you're in a period of forbearance, there's I know through Fed Loan, I did this with my loans. What I had to do was contact them and work it out with them. You have to be very intentional and very on top of it. I called, I said, hey, I'm going to send you a lump sum payment. It's going to be in the amount of what I would have paid, for 12 months, and they retroactively counted it as 12 payments towards my 120 payments. Again, it's not hard to do, but it requires a lot of diligence on your part and a lot of follow-through and a lot of follow-up just to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, these are my intents, please make this happen for me. Yes, you definitely can.
Let me just add, Fed loans, in case anyone doesn't know, Fed loans is actually the main loan servicer for the federal government that is responsible for administering the public service loan forgiveness program. And so when you go to do your research and ask your questions, you want to go to Fed loans first. Even if that's not your lender, you would ultimately have to shift to Fed loans to have them service your loan, and you don't become eligible for repayment until you actually make that 120th payment, and then you can request to have them. They'll do a review to make sure if you're on track, but you want to do that, and you want to make sure that you are in one of the eligible repayment types, and that's very, very important.
Yeah, you have to be in one of the income-based repayment models. There's, I think, 3 or 4 of them now. 4 of them now. Yeah, so you have to be in one of those for those payments to count, and you also have to be working in a service-related field. Let's see, Allison says, does your Ed Award get taxed by the state in which you did your service or the state in which you reside? Ooh. Do we know the answer to that question? I think it's the states that you earn the income in is where you pay the taxes to.
That is a good question to refer to a tax professional, just to be sure. We've come across multiple situations. The most that we can do on our end is just verify the state in which the education award was earned. But in terms of the specific laws that govern who can tax those funds, you will really have to contact the state that you reside in and the state that you did your service in, just to make sure.
Okay. Do we have any questions on the phone, Alyssa?
I show no questions in the queue, but again, if you'd like to ask a question over the phone, please press *1 and record your name.
All right. Monica Ayers, how do I know if my interest is being paid?
So you would need to contact your lender, your loan holder, just to make sure that they have applied the interest payment to your account. That's the only way that you're going to know. Because the trust office sends out your interest payment, we don't know how long it takes for your loan holder to credit your account. That's something that you would have to follow up with them with.
Totally. Let's see, Ashley, this is a good one. I think we covered this. Is there a way to set it up so your loans can be taken out monthly, like automatic withdrawal? The answer is no. You have to make that request each month that you need to make a payment. You have to go into your AmeriCorps account, do your payment request for every single month. There's no way to set it up as an automated process. Let's see. Shaylee says, if I serve 2 terms, the 7-year limit on my so if I serve 2 terms, will the 7-year limit on my Ed Award start the last day of my 2nd term? The answer is no. Each education award has its own time limits from the time that you earn it. So at the end of your 1st year, the clock starts ticking on your 1st education award. At the end of your 2nd year, the clock starts ticking on your 2nd one, and so forth. So at the end of your 2nd year, you'd have 6 years left on the 1st one and the full 7 on the 2nd. Let's see. Yeah, that's a lot of questions going through here. Let's see. If we have more questions after the presentation, where should we contact? You can route questions through myself, and I will get you in touch with the appropriate party. I'll go ahead and be brave here. Don't abuse this. I'm putting my email address in the chat, so just so you guys know. All right, so you can email me, and I'll get you in touch with whoever you need. Let's see. How long does it take to access the award?
Your award is available immediately. Once you successfully completed your term of service and you've been granted the education award, it is available immediate for use.
Yeah. So, I used to work at the Vista Member Support Unit, and that's where you all can call for questions, really in regards to anything. They can also help you out, and they can point you in the right direction if they don't know the answer. But typically, it's a few days after you end your service, you'll have the link in your AmeriCorps account. We have to close you out of service at the VMSU, so that process takes a little bit, and we have to make sure all your paperwork's in order and everything's good to go. Once we do that, we click a button, and your education award is released. So if you're finding that maybe you've been out of service for a couple of weeks and you still don't have your education award, please give the VMSU a call and alert them, and they'll figure out how to get that for you. So I'm going to go back to the phone one last time, and if we have no further questions on the phone, I think we will call it and we'll wrap it up.
And we did just have one come in. Give me one moment so I can get their name.
Yay.
And our question from the phones comes from Danielle. Your line is open.
Hello, Danielle.
Hi. So a few of us are wondering why the education award is listed as $5,775 when our amounts in the portal are different.
Your amount in the portal is different in terms of?
Like in our AmeriCorps portal, it's listed as less than that.
Are you in service or are you out of service?
In service.
What page are you looking at? At the end of service selection?
I'm looking at my I don't know, My Education Award. And it says 5,730.
Now, did you already do a term of service?
I did a term last year. This is my second year.
So the value of the education award goes up each year with the Pell Grant. So the current year is $5,775. The previous year was $5,730, and it will be a different amount starting next year in the new fiscal year. And
so the year that.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
It's the year that you start service.
It's the date that you start. So the fiscal year starts.
So it's the fiscal year in which you start service, and the fiscal year begins October 1st of each year. The new fiscal year begins. So if you start service before the new fiscal year, it's going to be a different amount than someone who started service after the fiscal year. So it changes each year.
Okay. I think some of us were just confused because we started in 2015, so it was a different amount.
Yeah.
So 2015 would have been a different amount.
Yeah, if you started before October 1st, 2015, your amount would be the one that you see originally, the $5,730. If you started after October 1st of 2015, then you're $5,775.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. Someone is having a question. I'm interested in a master's program. If I apply to an education institution that matches, can we leverage only using a portion of the award for a more significant benefit? Trying to figure out if I understand that question. Can we leverage only using a portion of the award for a more significant benefit? So if you apply to an institution that matches and you only use a little bit of the education award, maybe you're, what I and I'm just working on pure assumption here, is maybe you're saying like if they would match $5,000 of the education award, you're saying can you only give them $1,000 and still get $5,000 and then still have more education award left over? I'm not sure. I think it's called a match because they will match whatever you contribute, but I could be wrong, and that is going to be a question for that college. Call them and ask them and see, ask them to explain that because, again, each institution that matches does it differently. They all have different rules, different amounts, different ways that they go about that. So definitely give them a call because obviously we can't keep track of all the institutions and know what each and every one of them is doing. But yeah, so thank you all so much for joining us. We are so glad that we got to present today. Thank you, Nahid. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jessica and Indy from Education Northwest. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Alyssa, our operator. And if you guys have questions, you can get in touch with the VMSU, the Vista Member Support Unit. You can email them at vmsu@cns.gov, and they will answer any questions that you might have and route you to the appropriate individuals. Be sure to check out our next webinar. It is on project management. It's going to be on July 27th at the same time at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you want to look at past recordings of webinars, you can head over to the Vista campus under the Connect and Learn tab. There is a page just for webinars where all of our previous webinars are posted. Again, so thank you so much. Sign up for these webinars. Please give us your input, and we hope to talk to you again soon.